Katy Perry. The candy-colored queen who once ruled the world with whipped cream cannons, wigs in every shade of neon, and an endless scream of chart-topping candy cane anthems. And here's the dark truth. The same glitter that made her iconically unstoppable was also the poison that cracked her crown. Because in the glimmer of pop music, the climb to the top is dazzling, until the same crowd that once worshipped you suddenly starts laughing instead. So how does one of the world's biggest pop stars go from fireworks to fizzle? From teenage dream to living meme? Let's pull back the glitter curtain and uncover the story they don't want you to know and step into the dark reality of Katy's fall from pop royalty. Katy wasn't born in Candyland. She was Katherine Hudson, born October 25, 1984 in sunny Santa Barbara, raised under the strict eyes of Pentecostal pastor parents. A girl who sang hymns in church pews long before she strutted on red carpets. She recorded her first album at 16, a gospel record of all things. It sold absolutely nothing, but inside those tracks, the faint spark of ambition that would one day set the pop world on fire. LA was brutal. She moved to there chasing the dream, only to be dropped, dismissed, and discarded by labels that couldn't see past the preacher's kid. Imagine being told you're talented but not marketable, while the same execs were busy greenlighting boy bands with frosted tips. Still, Katy didn't fold. She rebranded herself with a new name, her mother's maiden name, Perry. A little sleight of hand, a little reinvention. And just like that, an icon was born. When Katy Perry stepped into the pop scene again, she arrived as a well-crafted character with colored hair, brave lyrics, and some theatrics. By 2008, she had the whole world's attention with a single scandalous line. I kissed a girl, and I liked it. And just like that, the pastor's daughter became pop's wild child. A character, a cartoon, a candy-coated rebel built for spectacle. And for a while it worked. It worked brilliantly. Katy Perry's voice was finally introduced to the world, and she changed the game too. She made the world realize that pop music could include storytelling that was both cheeky and brazen. Suddenly, it was no longer enough for a pop star to record catchy material. She had to have a personality too, maybe even be a little mysterious. With her colored wigs and creative outfits, she showed the industry that it was possible to carve out an identity and grab attention by being a spectacle. Her next album, One of the Boys, came next with some girl-powered hits. Hot and Cold followed, which was another singable anthem that made it to the top 40 and to the tongues of millions. She began taking tours, then bagged endorsements. She even began accepting late-night interviews, magazine cover shoots, and red carpet invitations. The works. Her next major hit was Teenage Dream, which was released in 2010. In fact, this album changed everything that the first album did not. The album carried hot singles like California Girls, which was a summer hit, Firework, which became one of those rare motivational anthems, E.T., and then Last Friday Night, TGIF. Teenage Dream was so good that it became the second album in history to have 5 singles at the top of the US Billboard Hot 100, after Michael Jackson's 1987 album Bad, and she became the first woman to do so too. Its 6th single, The One That Got Away, peaked at number 3 on that chart, and just like that, she also became the 3rd, after Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation 1814 and George Michael's Faith, to have 6 top 5 songs in the United States. The album topped charts in Australia, Austria, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, Scotland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. It sold more than 12 million copies worldwide and received diamond certifications in Brazil, Canada, and the United States, while being certified multi-platinum in Australia, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, India, Ireland, Italy, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom. Think about that for a second. 5 songs from the same collection of studio sessions sent listeners scrambling to download and stream. Katy Perry became the face of 2010's pop. Her fans included teenagers who hummed along and tattooed her lyrics on their arms. Endorsement deals grew, fashion lines and fragrances, and television slots stacked up. And by 2010-2011, Katy Perry's identity was a commodity with a high exchange rate. But there is a paradox. It is usually the very things that help a performer break through that ruin them. That is what happened to Katy. Besides, the music business in the late 2000s and early 2010s was shifting beneath everyone's feet. Digital downloads grew, and then streaming began to change the way songs became hits. Pop's center of gravity tilted toward different sounds and new artists who emerged on platforms that rarely existed months ago. Katy's team, producers like Max Martin and other hitmakers, understood how to architect songs and achieve massive reach. Still, in the new world, engineering only gets you so far, but she didn't know it yet. Katy had climbed to a height where even the air tasted different. From up there, it is tempting to believe the climb will never end. Well, it did. The same image that made her unforgettable soon ruined her. And it all started with the Super Bowl. Katy was handed the biggest stage in the world. The Super Bowl. The Super Bowl does not merely book entertainers. It has such a huge influence that its entertainers are very respected. It is almost as if they had been enthroned on a temporary throne. So for a moment, 12 minutes, Katy Perry was a sovereign. More than 100 million eyes were trained on the field that night, and her performance became the most watched ever in 2015. She opened with a roaring anthem delivered from on top of a golden beast. Then the stage became charged with costumes and choreography, and a guest list of other stars. It had been engineered to be the kind of thing people would talk about for months. It was supposed to coronate her image as the candy pop queen, but it didn't. One backup dancer ruined all those plans. How? This costumed backup dancer didn't seem to know what he was doing. And it was so obvious that he became the evening's headline, not Katy Perry. And no, he was not being booed. He was loved. This dancer in a shark costume won everyone's hearts with his messed up choreography, which had an adorable awkwardness. Soon, clips of his dance were trending, and a cultural moment was born. Think about that for a second. A single, small misstep changed the way millions viewed the entire performance. The conversation was supposed to be about the set list or the artist, but it tilted instead toward a dancing mascot. Even late-night hosts and talk shows turned the story away from Katy to the meme-worthy moment. Then the merchandise began rolling out. Left Shark, as the dancer was called, found itself on t-shirts. Coffee cups, figurines, the works. Well, it was here that the mood turned a little sour. Katy Perry's lawyers issued a cease and desist demand to the man selling the 3D printed models of the Left Shark, Fernando Sosa. And they gave the man such a hard time that he was even recorded to have said, "It looks like dictators and world leaders like Putin and Kim Jong-un or Chris Christie are much easier to deal with." His statement gave the world the impression that Katy was not much of a jolly, good sport as she pretended to be. Everything began to change right there. When the public begins to giggle at you rather than with you, it means the balance is tipping. And you know what this meant? It meant that the same theatrics that got Perry to headline the biggest show on television had broken her mysterious aura and set her up for more scrutiny. In fact, in the Hollywood Reporter's review, the show was described as lacking cohesion and was unlikely to be ranked among the more memorable game breaks. To make it worse, it also said she was upstaged by Missy Elliott, as the crowd was more excited to see the rapper than Katy. The dancer later explained that parts of the routine allowed for freestyle. But those explanations are unfortunately not as good as the 2-second clip of a shark prancing at the wrong pace. Pop music is a fast business, and the arc that takes a decade to build can be changed by a single moment of mockery. And when the internet starts laughing at a superstar, can they ever fully recover? According to Katy Perry's silence after 2013, not really. 4 years, that's how long she was away. 4 years in pop music is an entire era. New voices emerge, and the fans that once loved a particular spectacle begin to love another. That gap was a deliberate space she took to rebuild and rethink her voice and image. But during her rest, a lot changed. Streaming increased, and the radio's monopoly on music loosened. Now, millions of listeners could make algorithms and curated lists to decide the hits. What that meant in practical terms was that a song needed to thrive in the new streaming culture to be considered a success. During her sabbatical, Katy worked really hard. She met producers, worked with many new collaborators, and created a new album. When her album, Witness, finally arrived in June 2017, the reception was, to put it plainly, complicated. The record debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, but by the next week, Witness tumbled down the chart. Here is why that was terrible. Witness was meant to redefine Perry's relationship with her audience. There was even a marketing campaign that promised a more politically aware, candid Katy. There was also the 4-day live stream she launched, where viewers watched her cook, practice yoga in real time. It was so innovative, but it also looked too calculated. But there was more drama to come. Enter Taylor Swift. The origin of Katy's quarrel with Taylor was awkwardly petty. According to insiders, backup dancers left one pop. Stars toured to join another. Simple. But that simple misunderstanding led to several shots being fired through songs and fan wars. Taylor's song Bad Blood was immediately taken as a Katy sub. And some of Katy's songs and interviews, like Swish Swish, were all taken as snarky rejoinders. The feud became so terrible that fan bases were divided into factions. Of course, it didn't make it better that Katy was up against Taylor, who had a pretty large and dedicated fan base. So, for years, the coverage framed her as the bad guy. A feud like this changes a lot because when one portion of the public chooses sides, it affects ticket sales, your social media reputation, and even the willingness of some media outlets to give you the benefit of the doubt. The Swift-Perry hostility gave birth to many pop culture think pieces, which also meant that Katy's attempts to change public opinion were immediately read as her trying to clean up past squabbles. Of course, the stars reconciled, but the damage to Katy's reputation was already done. And so all her singles struggled. Chained to the Rhythm did well, peaking in the top 5, but the next releases did not do well. Bon Appetit scraped at the lower reaches of the Hot 100. Swish Swish went viral thanks to the beef, but it never became a legacy single. It was obvious that the public's appetite had changed. Something that once commanded the top of playlists was no longer guaranteed a place there. And reviews of Witness were very blunt. They described it as an album that felt uncertain of its voice. They even accused the record of being musically pleasant but emotionally thin, and of flirting with political matters without the lyrical depth to carry them. They called it desperate, not because the songs were poorly produced, but because of the attempt to recast Katy as something else. Even her tours suffered. Industry reports showed a huge decline in attendance. Fans showed up, but in fewer numbers and with less exuberance than before. But instead of fading quietly, Katy fought. She tried being earnest. She tried being a pilgrim and a disco queen. But when none of those versions worked, she reached again for the one thing that always worked: the spectacle. What followed was a string of public stunts. One happened just a few months ago. In April 2025, Katy boarded a suborbital rocket on an all-female Blue Origin flight. The launch was documented by mainstream outlets, and she also shared a video from inside the capsule. But everything looked fake. It looked like the sort of calculated spectacle created just for clout. In fact, within hours of the launch, people began to argue over whether the whole trip had been staged or not. Besides, it was easy not to believe Katy, as only months before, digitally altered images of her attending the Met Gala had gone viral, images that were realistic enough to fool her own mother. So even if the flight was perfectly real, the public's memory of being fooled by her false photos made it easy to disbelieve her. That is exactly how Katy Perry turned herself into a former pop star everyone keeps around from laughs. It was a slow-motion fall, the kind that tricks you into thinking you still have balance until suddenly you're flat on the floor with the wind knocked out of you. Katy Perry didn't wake up one morning to discover her empire gone. All of these happened slowly. In the music industry, nobody is untouchable. The same spotlight is always searching for the next subject, and the moment it shifts, your shine begins to fade. One wrong album, one misstep, one shift in taste, and the empire you spent years building can crumble overnight. But the industry loves to write obituaries early. They did it with Madonna, with Britney, with Mariah. So will Katy Perry rise again? Can a pop star really come back from failure and rise again? Tell us what you think below.